interact with, and I appreciate all his efforts to get me up here. I'm a little bit jaded on Agile conferences, to tell you the truth. I've been going to them for 10 years now, and almost done. Only because I'm more interested in some new things that go beyond Agile, and maybe this talk is a bit of a bridge to that new world. I don't know, but we'll see what comes of this. So I'll just talk really briefly about myself. I've been in the software field since I was a little kid. My father's a programmer, so I'm a second-generation software person, and I began programming very young in middle school and high school, and then I ended up getting a job on Wall Street during college, a year off, and started programming there when I was 19 years old, and eventually started Industrial Logic in 1996 to bring the magic and light of software development to the world. So it's kind of named off of Industrial Light and Magic. And I did get the idea for the name of Industrial Logic in the bathtub, which is where I get a lot of my best ideas. So Linda Rising's talk is still echoing in my brain here. And I have not had caffeine today, which is why I have a headache, I think. So anyway, how many of you here are managing software projects? Okay, good number of you. And how many of you here are actively developing or involved in the software development itself? Okay, so it's almost half and half, which is really nice. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be talking about these two people here. On the left, we have the business-oriented person. On the right, we've got the geek. And we're going to ask them, what is sufficient design? So this question comes up quite a bit. What's best? Build it right or ship it fast? And this is the tension that we see a lot of times out there. The software craftsmanship people would easily be on the build it right side. Maybe the lean startup people would be on the ship it fast side. What we're really going to look at today is what contexts, what are the things going on the ground that might impact our choices around shipping it fast or building it right. So we're going to look at these two perspectives, because it often is the case that the business person doesn't really know so much about the software code, doesn't care. They just want to get business results. So if we look at this grid here, we have fast and slow, and dirty and clean in terms of the code or the design. It's no mistake that a lot of business people are up there, right? They're interested in getting fast business results, and they don't necessarily care how dirty the code is, how dirty the design is. Is that your experience? What about the people who are not programmers? I mean, is that accurate to some extent? I mean, is that the forces at work? Is that what's driving you? A lot of times it is, right? There are so many factors beyond the actual act of writing software, designing software. And when you get people who write and design software talking about the larger business issues, they don't know what they're talking about a lot of the times. Much of the time, they don't talk about all the forces at work that are shaping the fact that this business guy is up there. Meanwhile, we get, the software craftsman down here in the clean and slow area. We've got to make sure this software is just perfectly written. In fact, we're going to make sure the tests are extraordinarily beautiful. The test code has to be perfect. We've got to be using the latest techniques and the very latest testing tools. Because otherwise we're not cool. And oh, by the way, we need time to be working on writing closure, because that keeps us cool. So that's the extreme of the craftsman. Right? I'm showing extremes right now. Obviously, hopefully not everyone's at these extremes. But this is where folks are sometimes led. So we're going to look at these dimensions here because ultimately that grid fails. That grid I just showed you, the grid, really fast, slow, dirty, clean, those are just 2 dimensions. There are more dimensions that we need to factor in when we're looking at the motivations of business people and of developers. Value, demand, and delivery are 3 that I want to look at today from the point of view of the business person. The value, what kind of value are we delivering to the customer? Is it high value or is it low value? Demand, how much demand is there for this thing? Right? We could think it has high value, but it doesn't actually. Maybe there's not enough demand for it. So we're going down the wrong route. Delivery, how fast can we get it out to market? Get it to our customers' hands? The developer has different concerns. Design, debt, and development itself. Design, is the design simple or is it complex? Debt, how much technical debt are we incurring? Is it high or low? And development, are we crafting a solution or are we assembling a solution from pre-existing parts? Now, one thing I started to notice a while back was this 5-point X development life cycle. Okay, I would go to different companies and I would work with them, a lot of times looking at their release planning, and we would look at the numbers of the release, and it was often a 5-point X project. 5-point X was the number. And some of you may have heard me talk about this before, but I started to wonder, why are we always being called in on these 5-point X projects? What's the reason? So I realized that it's basically a development life cycle. 1.0 release is awesome. We rock. We are amazing. We love working here. Marketing and sales loves us. It's one big party. We just get the software out fast and everyone is psyched. Company rocks. 2.0 release is still pretty good. There's some overtime we did. We had a few bugs, but we, kind of worked on those bugs. But we still love working here. It's just not as good as the old days of 1.0, but it's still not a terrible place to work. 3.0, things are getting bad. We have 2,347 bugs to fix. We can't really focus on the new stuff because we have all the bugs in the 2.0 and the 1.0 releases to work on. And sales and marketing are starting to get unhappy with us because the pace of development has really slowed down. 4.0 is really bad. We've lost about 14 programmers who just left. We're basically inundated with maintenance problems. We've got sales and marketing starting to talk about outsourcing the work. They don't have any faith in development's ability to deliver anything anymore. And morale is at an all-time low. And at 5.0, that's when they say, maybe we should try Agile. And let's start calling in some consultants to clean up the mess. This is happening over and over and over again, right? A lot of times we're called in because people are afraid their jobs are going to get lost. Because there's major talk of outsourcing. They say, well, maybe Agile could save us. We could bring in Agile to clean things up. It happens all the time. But usually at this point in time, there's a very high amount of technical debt, very unhappy customers of the software. They're not happy. They've got bugs that they're encountering all the time. Sales and marketing aren't happy because they're not able to push things along. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. How many of you here have gotten to a 5.x situation? Okay, so that's nearly 2/3 of the room.
Oh, parachuted in as consultant or caused by ourselves? Never mind.
I think it happens. I see it happening all over the industry. It just happens everywhere. Consultants or no consultants. And a lot of times I want to start coming in with those yellow rubber gloves and various cleaning instruments to make it look like I'm really a janitor. And nothing more, because this is the mess they leave us with. And this is really what the software craftsmen are saying is no good. This is no good. We are seeing this over and over and over again. No matter how much wisdom there is put out there, no matter how many Jolt Cola award-winning books are written, we continue to see this 5-point disaster. So I can understand the software craftsmen saying, hey, we need to stop doing this. We need to stop writing crap. But then we have the other problem, which is, how do we do the lean startup thing? How do we get our experiments validated? How do we learn quickly? How do we fail fast? There are times when software development is not so important. We just want to get an answer to our question. We might do that with a mock-up. We might not write any code. And when we do write the code, its quality may not matter at this point in time. Later on, it might matter. So let's talk a little bit more about how we're going to navigate those waters. First off, this is a model I borrowed from Jim Highsmith, who himself borrowed it from, I forget his name, but he wrote the 1 Minute Manager, Ken Orr. And what I'm seeing here is the cost of change curve on the left, years on the bottom there, and this is what we typically see. The optimal cost of change curve is relatively low. That's what you want. But the actual cost of change curve is very high, and it gets higher and higher as the years go by. Okay? So technical debt is really that difference between your optimal cost of change and your actual cost of change. And it just goes higher and higher. Okay, by the way, I'll be making these slides available on SlideShare. So, customer responsiveness goes down as those years go by and the cost of change gets higher and the technical debt increases. We see this. So this is just a model of what I just talked about. Okay, that's what it looks like. If you want to show it to someone who has to see models to understand the problem, then show them that graph. Back to our business guy. He's got a little devil talking in his ear. And that devil is saying things like, don't worry about the software quality. You've got a career to take care of. If you get that project shipped, you're going to get the promotion you've been looking for, you're going to get more money, you're going to buy that BMW you've always wanted. You are not in... Don't have to worry. The next idiot can handle the quality problem. It's not your problem. Just get it done. Get those folks working and get it done. That's the devil talking into the ear of the business person. The little angel talking into the ear of the business person saying, no, you've got to do what's right for the organization. And what's right for the organization is to make sure that we have high quality and customers are happy and we're producing something that is valuable, and don't worry about your career. If you do good work, your career will take care of itself. But don't be focused on your career track at the expense of the quality of the system. And the devil has his answers for saying why that's nonsense and just go for it. And the angel says, no, please don't do that, stop, don't come back. So it's this kind of thing that happens. And ultimately, usually what we see with the 5.x scenario is the devil wins. And they just keep pushing more features after another, not looking genuinely at quality, and you get the mess on your hands. Meanwhile, developers have their own angel and devil talking to them. Okay? Have you ever seen something? I've been talking about this for a while. I call it resume-based development. Okay, and I just saw some threads on this recently, so I was surprised to hear other people talking about it, but I've been talking about this for at least 10 years. Resume-based development. Resume-based development says, how can I get Scala onto my resume? Maybe I can somehow convince them that we must use Scala on this project. I mean, years ago it was Ruby, now it's Scala and Haskell and Clojure. And soon those will be, unimportant. There will be some new languages. I think every programmer should learn the letters of their names. So I'm going to be learning J and K pretty soon, the J language. language, the K language. So that's going to make it cool. But resume-based development is one of those nasty little things that's talking to the ear of the developer. How can I bring in a software architecture or a language or some tool that I want to get experience with that really has no rightful purpose on this project, but since I want experience with it, I'm going to make a case for us bringing it in. That's bad stuff, right? I have a whole company where, we built a product in Java, and at some point in time, some people wanted to change it all to Ruby. And I thought about it hard. I consider these things, I'm open to change, But this was several years ago, by the way, 4 years ago. And I made a nice long list of reasons why Java was a better choice for us. Not just for us, but we go out and consult to companies. Most of them are doing Java or C# or something like that. So for us, having hands-on experience doing stuff with, Hibernate and all the various Java tools is very useful for us going out and consulting. And I just shot down their reasons for going with Ruby. It wasn't compelling enough, given all the reasons we had. Ultimately, they wanted to be Ruby programmers. I think they are Ruby programmers today, but they're not working in industrial logic. They didn't fit. In fact, we did go to Ruby for a little while and then retreated and said, this is a bad choice. I ultimately said, even though I have all these great choices, I want to make you happy. So let's try to do this Ruby thing for a little while. We did it, and we flushed it and went back to Java. Now my point is not whether Java is better than Ruby, blah, blah, blah. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is my business. And looking very, very carefully at it and saying, what's best for my business, given all the constraints? Back then we couldn't even hire a Ruby programmer. It's impossible to put an ad out. People, they sent us emails saying, well, I don't know Ruby, but I'd like to learn Ruby, so if I could join your company, that'd be great. In a small company, that just doesn't cut it. You can't do that. You can do it in a giant corporation. You can't do it in a small company. You've got to know what you're doing. So that's one danger of the devil talking to the programmer. Another one is forget quality. Just smash that code in there. Don't worry about cleaning the code. Don't worry about writing tests. Don't worry about the build breaking. Just get your piece done and move on. The angel is saying, no, that's not the way we do things around here. Don't do that. Write those tests. Refactor mercilessly. Check in consistently. Don't bring in a technology that doesn't fit to build your resume. You guys call it CVs over here, probably. And so on and so forth, back and forth, and that's the problem going on in developers is. So my point is, developers and managers have these ongoing issues, ongoing motivational things tugging at them. And that's going to lead to certain consequences on the ground. Now, when I talk about sufficient design, here's what people often think of. This is an air conditioner. Don't have air conditioning in your car, you can create it, no problem. On the left is someone who wanted to get a water heater for their shower. On the right is a wheelchair that someone made out of a plastic seat. Here we have some duct tape being used on the wing, on the tail of an airplane. You don't want to fly that airline, trust me. This one I love. These are all pictures from thereifixedit.com. You can't see it, but it's down there somewhere. I've got attributions for that. So, but anyway, yeah. Here's another one. So when I say sufficient design, that's what people often think. They think that I'm talking about these crap kinds of solutions like that. Okay? And here's yet another one. So let's talk really about what sufficient design is, because sufficient design is not these kinds of throw-together solutions like you just saw. All right? It's not that variety at all. First off, let's come back to our wheelchair. That wheelchair, it turns out, the photograph that was put on thereifixit.com, but there was a comment put underneath it saying, oh, by the way, that's actually something real that's used by the Free Wheelchair Mission. The Free Wheelchair Mission has found a way to build a very, very inexpensive wheelchair that they can make and distribute to the poorest places in the world, where people before were literally crawling around in the dust. They found a way to make an ultra inexpensive wheelchair that they can distribute to people in the world. Okay? Manufacturing in bulk at low cost. All right? Deliver at no cost to least serve. This is their mission. They want to deliver it they prefer to deliver it at no cost to the least served people in the world. Okay? Their goal is to quickly deliver to 20 million people who need wheelchairs around the world. They're not at that goal yet. $59.20 to make a wheelchair. $59.20. A normal wheelchair, when you see someone, in a country like ours or yours, they're typically $2,000 to $3,000. Okay, they've managed to figure out how to make one for $59.20. The nearest competitor that I looked at on the web was $150. You had to donate $150 to get the wheelchair made for someone. This is way cheaper. They did it by using some standard parts. Okay, cheap patio furniture, tough durable bike tires, tough cheap casters, steel frames that are cheaply produced. Everything is standard on this thing. They found a way to use pre-existing parts to fabricate a functioning wheelchair that can work in hostile environments where there are no roads and stairways, there's lots of dirt and lots of holes and there's lots of stuff to cross. Durable bike tires are great for that. You get a flat tire, people know how to fix flat tires even in, very poor countries. So it's a remarkable achievement they have here. Looking at our gauges here, or dials, value, demand, and delivery, there's high value to this, obviously. Right? It's not monetary value, but it's just goodwill and good for people. So there's definitely high value. Certainly there's high demand. With over 20 million people around the world that need these things, there's plenty of demand for it. Delivery must be fast, because this is a problem. The guy that started this mission, he was on vacation with his wife, and they saw this. He's an engineer. He saw this on vacation, someone crawling around in the dirt, and said, we got to do something. So he went back and engineered this thing. So all high on value, demand, and delivery. Design. The design has got to be simple. If it's not simple, it's probably going to be expensive. And it's probably going to break down. Debt must be low, right? We have to have low debt on this in terms of the technical debt. What are we doing when we build this thing? What kind of technical debt are we incurring? It's not a software project, but you understand what I mean, right? You can come up with something that doesn't quite work. That's going to fall apart easily, right? Bad screws, bad steel, bad whatever. That's the equivalent of technical debt here. So it needs to be low debt. Development. This is not something that's crafted necessarily. It's assembled. It's simply assembled from parts. Okay, now this is a picture that I took at a company actually in Toronto, which has a very high amount of technical debt. Okay, this is a 10-year-old piece of C++ code. It's 28 pages long. It's one method. And I took this picture just to show the executives what does the technical debt look like. And we had to roll it out through the hallway of the hotel we were in and photograph and film it. Now, this particular company is in a very different position. So let's look at that. Basically, that system was critical to their operation. It was the system that would gather the data and do the analytics that would feed other systems in the company and other systems in other companies, right? Partner companies. So very, very important system to that. High value in terms of that system. The demand was dropping. Their competitors were coming out with advertisements showing people, holding their hands like this and going, don't tolerate software crashes. giant font letters, right, in a full industry magazine, full page ad. You know, and basically that was pointing the finger at their system, because they were an industry leader, but in the 10th year of existence of this product, the thing was just falling down all the time with memory issues, having major, major difficulties. I felt so bad for the programmers on that project, because they would come in and the amount of complexity they were dealing with every day was enormous. It just huge complexity looking at this code and trying to do something with it. The delivery was incredibly slow. I mean, their project was like 4 months late when they first asked us to start helping them. Just to say, this is such a disaster. So that's the situation they were in. From the design point of view, highly complex design. I mean, the code was incredibly complex. A 28-page method, are you kidding me? You know, where they had a state, it was a state machine in that. And one of the states was called unknown. And they truly didn't know how they got into that state. No one. The coding conventions were all over the place, because like so many people had touched the code over the years, so it was all just a total mess. They just didn't spend any time doing hygiene, any time doing cooking. So the debt was extraordinarily high. In fact, the development was, I wouldn't call it crafted because it's not high craft, and it's certainly not assembled from parts, but it's somewhere away from crafted. Okay? In this situation, you know, what do you think? I mean, remember the business guy up in the right corner going fast and dirty? They've been doing that a long time. They can't do that anymore. They need to move in a completely different direction. So what we did with them was we worked with them to take all of their smoke tests, which were all manual. The smoke test just is the thing kind of doing what we think it's supposed to do. And there was maybe 60 or 70 of them. They were all done manually. We automated every single one of them. Like many companies, they'd already bought a really crappy automated testing tool. Spent over $100,000 on it. So we just used that, because that was what was there. And we built automated tests for them. In fact, they would only run on a monitor of a certain size. If you tried to run those tests on a monitor of a bigger size, the test would fail. But that's the way that testing, they spent the $100,000 on the testing tool, so we used it. But the point was, we did get some temporary testing scaffolding in place in order to sort of go in there and start to make some deeper changes. And there was one particular time, we were mentoring them for weeks. One particular time, they were trying to put a little bit of new functionality in. Most of this was just stabilize. One little piece of work was happening that was new. And I happened to look at the code that got written one morning by one of the programmers. And it was 6 pages long, a method. One method, 6 pages long. I couldn't believe it. So what I did was I printed it out, I put it up on the wall, and then I sat with him and we refactored it together for the rest of the day. And then we got it down to, you know, a manageable method that called other methods. Okay? And it was all quite readable, intention revealing and so forth. But I printed that out. It was much shorter, so we got rid of a lot of duplication. And I printed that out and put it next to the other one. And then we had a team meeting around that and said, don't do this anymore. So I was really making a big point there that we have got to move this thing closer to crafted. We've got to take the debt and start paying it down. And one way to do that was to start getting the automated tests happening. So that was just a major legacy project where everything had to be moved in a different direction. Complex to simple, debt lower, crafted higher. Okay, and management was fully behind that. I didn't show them these dials at the time, but I did show them the 28-page method. They knew there were problems. They supported us fully. The programmers were not used to this. They were used to going fast and dirty. So there were times when they'd say to us, no, Josh, listen, we don't have time for that. And I'd say, yes, you do. And then they'd say, no, we don't. And I'd eventually say, I'll be right back. And I would go get the manager and bring them over and say, and this is a high-level manager, and bring them over and say, What do you think, John? Do we have time? We have time. Do what he's telling you. So we had full management support there to make these dials go in a better direction. When they did ship that version of software, they started getting letters from their clients saying, thank you. You know, this version of the project is the most stable version you have shipped in years. We are so grateful now to have something. Because we're trying to acquire data from a hardware device for very important different kinds of scientific things. And it was falling on its face. So anyway, that was that situation there. How about the wiki? Ward Cunningham's Wiki Web. The intention of this was quick collaboration on the web. Ward originally created this in 1995. The major motivation for doing it was to help people who are writing software patterns to collaborate on the web. Because lots of different people were interested in patterns, and it was the early days of the patterns movement. Folks wanted to write patterns, so let's provide a simple way to write patterns on the web. At the time, the value of this wasn't really well known. There was no Wikipedia. No one knew how big the wiki was going to be. But Ward just thought there needs to be a way to read and write on the web and do it quickly. Wiki was a term he found on a bus in Hawaii on vacation. The Wiki bus, which is the fast bus. It means fast. So he came back from Hawaii and coded up Wiki, and he did it fast. He did it very fast. He wrote Perl code. He told me it was his first Perl program. He'd never written Perl before. His first Perl program was Wiki. And I think it was 400 lines of Perl code for Wiki back then. When they wrote the book, I showed you here, The Wiki Way, they rewrote those 400 lines of Perl, got it down to 200 to do the same thing. That's Ward. So demand was low. Delivery, he wanted it to be fast. Demand was low because no one really knew what this thing was yet. Delivery was fast. He whipped up that Perl pretty quickly. From the point of view of Ward, the programmer, the design was ultra simple. It actually, I mean, if I'm talking about the first version, I would have moved that simple thing over a little bit because the later version that he refactored was even simpler. The debt was extremely low. Development was very much crafted. This is not assembled from parts. So that's an example of the dials for Wiki. Now this is a shot from our e-learning software. We produce some Agile e-learning software to help programmers learn how to really be Agile. And this is a diagram here. It's actually J.D. Rainberger's session, one of his programming sessions that was recorded. It was close to 4-hour long session. Okay, that's 4 over there, 4 hours. And he did a ton of refactorings along the way. The blue circles there mean refactorings. This is the heart and soul of our e-learning software. Okay, it's a really critical part of what we've done. If I look at all of the code we've written in our e-learning software over the last 3.5 to 4 years, I can tell you exactly which part of that code is making us the most money. Because I can specifically point to a case where a very, very large deal, the largest deal we've ever done, with a company, hinged on the fact of whether we had this kind of capability or not. Not just this graph, but the ability to give automated feedback to students without us being there. It all hinged on that. So this area of the code, to me, I can put a dollar value on it. I can say, compared to all that other code, the administrative code, the code that shows pictures on the screen, blah, blah, blah. None of that matters compared to this code here in terms of monetary values. From a business point of view, I'd ask all of you, how many of you can look at your systems and say, this is the area that makes the most money, this area here makes the next most money, this area here isn't so important. How can you do that? Because if you can do that, I'll argue this. If you understand where the dials are on it, right, that particular part of the area of our code is extremely high value. There is high demand for that, right? Because if we can automatically do something like critique a programmer's TDD performance and give them incredibly high value feedback for a low price, there's pretty high value for it. There's pretty high demand for it. The delivery of it is something that takes time, because we've got to really think through how we're doing this. So it's not like we can just deliver it quickly. It's a complicated problem to solve. From the point of view of the design, we'd like it to be simple. We also had to get it out pretty fast to close a deal. That big deal I was talking about, there was a deadline there for it. So we had to work relatively quickly to get it out. That means that our design is not as simple as I'd like it to be. I can look at it today and tell you, it could be better. It could be simpler. I know that. So the image there is not as far to the simple side as I'd like it to be. But it's sufficient for now. The debt is pretty low. There's some debt there that I'm not crazy about. So it's also not pushed all the way to the left. Development was crafted. We're not assembling from parts. We're really focused on writing custom code, custom tests, refactoring it mercilessly, and so forth. So I'm doing that, though, because that is the most important part of our system, right? We devote a lot of attention to that area of the code. If we were to show you a heat map of all the activity we do, you'd see the most activity happens around that area of the code, because that's where we make the most money. How many programmers think about money? How many of them think about where the real investment is paying off? Where are you getting return on investment? You know, when was the last time a programmer said to you, I don't think we should refactor this area of the code because it doesn't have a high ROI? Is that how programmers speak? Or do managers say, no, we've been going too fast for too long. I think we should start paying down some technical debt. Can you start weaving in some debt repayment stuff while we're doing that little bit of that new stuff? Let's do that for the next 3 weeks. Do you hear that?
Yes.
Do you hear that?
Yes. Only the programmers won't execute. There's no tradition of thinking that way.
There's no. I've heard that too.
Management goes and actually advocates to pay down the debt, but then there's schedule pressure and everybody's attuned to that.
Great point, Robert. I have a client now that would love to improve the design of their software. They love it, and they're not doing it. The management is telling the programmers, please spend time doing this, improve the design. But the programmers aren't really doing it. The programmers definitely do some refactoring, but they're not making some significant design changes, design improvements. They're not getting that thing pushed closer to simplicity in terms of the design. They're not paying down the debt as much as they ought to be. And that's a problem. Because, again, it usually comes down to the culture of the programmers. What are they rewarded on? Are they rewarded for paying down debt? Can you visualize that for anyone? Is anyone visualizing it? Look how much debt was removed. Look how much duplicated code we got rid of today. Is anyone rewarded for it? Are managers rewarded for paying down technical debt? Where's the reward incentive? I mean, that's a complex subject in its own right, the whole reward mechanisms and all that, but we do know this, there is no reward mechanism for doing, what I would think of as good work. Sufficient design. Is there any real, what there is typically there's reward for being a hero, as Linda said yesterday. Hero stuff, that you get rewarded for. Oh, we stayed up for 3 days in a row, fixing all the problems, we got the release out, and the money came in, and let's have a big party. You guys are amazing. I've heard of teams that have been given demotions because they run so smoothly. They were doing Agile really, really beautifully, and not having fires, not having to put out fires, everything working beautifully, and didn't get any kind of recognition while the teams that dealt with the huge fires and problems, staying late, working weekends, solving major bugs, they got all the rewards because they were deemed to be, heroes. Big problem. And usually it just comes down to a lack of understanding. Just a simple lack of understanding. Freeset is a company in India. Fascinating story here. Something David Hussman initiated in terms of his philanthropy work, and worked with Naresh Jain, who works with us on Industrial Logic. These women here were former prostitutes. The entire idea of FreeSet was to get these women off the streets, working at a company where they make shirts and tote bags that they can sell around the world. So here's some of these women. This was a philanthropical project that was initiated. FreeSet is doing something of very high value for getting these women off the streets. A lot of them are, it's just terrible stories about the way they're, fooled into coming to a big city away from their village, and then they don't get to go back. And it's a terrible, terrible thing. Demand is low for their products. Right? Who's ever heard of FreeSet? Anyone here ever heard of FreeSet? No? You're not buying FreeSet t-shirts and tote bags on a regular basis? Demand was low. They didn't have a website at a certain point, or they had a really measly old website where they weren't selling much of anything. So they were just selling it locally. Delivery, they needed this site right away. Needed it fast. So what do you think this looks like? The design was going to be ultra simple. The debt had to be low because they don't hire any programmers. They don't have the money to have a full-time programmer on staff. So they got some philanthropical help. Some people came along and said, "We'll help you for nothing." But those people knew in the design, they better come up with something ultra simple that works for FreeSet, that does the job, but doesn't have a lot of problems associated with it. Because a lot of bugs coming out of large technical debt would not work well. No one's there to maintain that. No one can afford it. Development was assembled, right? How do you think they did it? How do you think they built this site really fast, really simple, with low defects? What did they use? What? Druha? Drupal? Drupal? Yeah, very similar, yes. Drupal. A content management system. They used a content management system. Wait a second. They didn't use Ruby on Rails? Oh no, they didn't use Ruby on Rails. They used a content management system. Destroyed. It is so much better than Ruby on Rails. It's better than Clojure. It's better than Haskell and Scala. That was the right choice for this situation. It's working beautifully today. In fact, they're doing continuous delivery. They set up the CMS in such a way that they can check in and it automatically goes to production, and it's just continuously delivering. Anytime you check in some content, it just goes live. Beautiful, beautiful example of not writing a lot of code, but focusing the most on what these people need. Right? These dials are really important. Assembly, rather than crafting, was exactly the right thing they needed to do here. How many programmers do you know who would have the maturity to step back and say, let's not write code. Let's actually assemble something. Especially if you're really good at it. If you're really good at Ruby on Rails, your first impulse is to fire up a Ruby on Rails app. Oh, we'll have it for you in no time. Is that the right fit, given that they have no Ruby programmers there? That they don't know how to maintain a database that it could interact with? A database-backed website? So I don't want to hammer the point home, but the point is, high maturity developers know when to assemble things or when to craft them. Our greatest hits shop. This is where we sell our e-learning. We're currently interested in increasing our funnel, right? Getting more people through the funnel. The funnel is they show up on the website, do they end up buying? We don't have the greatest numbers there right now, right? We're not that happy with how many people show up and buy. Therefore, we're in a situation where we need to experiment. We don't need to write high-quality code to experiment. We need to put some experiments out the door quickly, learn from them, and then move on. So this is the exact opposite of the area where I told you about earlier, where we craft our code to do these automated critiques of TDD performances. This is different. We're now very much in lean startup land of total experimentation. experiment-driven design. We're looking at numbers from Google Analytics. We're trying to see what happens when people come into our site. Where do they go? How many of them actually end up buying? Okay, what changes can we make to make those numbers look better? Or not look better, but make those numbers better, right? We wrote here, this is scary, 6% move forward. That's not a good number. We actually sell most of our stuff to corporations. We don't do that many individual sales, but we'd like to do more of them. So we want to improve those numbers. So we're looking at more and more analytic reports. This is a particular design that we came up with for our table of contents page. When you come to buy, you're looking at a page like this. Okay, we put a lot of information in these tabs. Turns out no one's clicking on them. No one's clicking on those tabs. Very, very few people are clicking on them. So there's a bunch of data behind there that is critical, we think, for them to realize they should buy this thing, and they're not clicking on it. So for us, we need to change that. We could look, so we looked at our code and said, well, what's the fastest way we can do an experiment? And we saw some technical debt. We said, who cares? Don't worry about it for now. Blow it off. We'll get to it later. Because we want to build this thing. This is a newer version. Still not as good as we need it to be, but it's a better version. We built this in half a day and just shoved it in and said, get it out the door. And we got a bunch of albums, and we said, well, let's just make one album have this new style, and we'll look at the analytics for that and see what happens. Compare it to the old way. We're clearly here in a validated learning, as Eric said, validated learning situation, where we value learning right now way more than crafting the code. So the sufficient design here is, whatever the heck it takes to just get this thing out there, do it fast. I don't care what problems we encounter. Now, we have the maturity to not let technical debt skyrocket out of control. So as soon as we learn from our experiments, and we're continuing to learn from them, we do go back and pay down debt. Right? We don't just let it accrue and become a problem. So here, the value is high to us. The demand is way lower than we'd like. We'd like the demand to be much higher. So we're puzzling over how to make that higher. And we need to quickly deliver solutions to learn from. But the design does not have to be simple. Whatever it takes to get the validated learning out, do it. Whatever it takes to learn quickly, just shove it in there. I don't care. Now, if you send it to a craftsman, they'd say, I'm a craftsman. I don't do that. It's my code of ethics. We would say, that's junk. You're trying to do what's right for the organization. For the organization, we need to improve that right now. We'll get to your craftsmanship stuff later. Right now, business is more important. Back to the 28-page method that I talked about earlier, and the company that had all that technical debt, business wasn't so important. Craftsmanship was important. So debt here was, we were incurring some debt by shoving in this new way of putting out a table of contents. And, we're in the craft side. We're not really assembling things, so it's our own custom code. All right, so this brings me to the sketch, craft, and refine cycle. All right. One of the things that we do is make a distinction between when are we sketching something, when are we crafting it, and when are we refining it. Okay, artist students. If you study how artists work, the first thing they do is they do a sketch, to learn from. They do it rapidly. They don't usually put color in. We have an artist we work with who puts color in very quickly, but he also has versions that don't have color like this. And he just does them very rapidly, shows us the picture and says, is this kind of what you're looking for? And we say, yeah, no, let's change it, this and that, and so forth. And then we get to the craft point, where he starts crafting something out of the sketch. And then eventually, we don't like that either, and we refine it further to get to our final, in this case, poster for one of our workshops. Sketching, crafting, and refining. Now here's the thing. We might sketch something and ship it. Right? The new table of contents. It's kind of a sketch of a new idea. It's not really heavily crafted or refined. We just sketch out a new idea on a whiteboard, throw it in the code, and ship it. That's sketching. When we start to realize we like what we got, we'll start to craft it. We'll craft the code, we'll craft the solution, we'll craft the user interface pages, and so forth. And eventually we'll come back over time and further refine it when we find little problems. So sketching, crafting, and refining is a very nice model to use, even in your vocabulary, when you're building stuff. Because I think sufficient design is, imbued in all three stages. There's a sufficient design when you're sketching, there's a sufficient design when you're crafting, and there's a sufficient design when you're refining. The XP practices are, often said and spoken about in terms of black and white. Do them all the time. That's 10 years old now, or more than 10 years old. It's not consistent with sufficient design. I don't do all these things all the time. We change those dials around depending upon the context. So anyone who says, I miss the old days, XP was the only one true way, that's not accurate. XP is a wonderful thing. I love XP. But I use it where it's appropriate, not everywhere. James Bach wrote some wonderful essays in the 90s about good enough. Good enough quality, and good enough is another article I'll show you in a minute. Good enough involves rational choices, he said, not compulsive behavior. Compulsive behavior is we must always do everything the same way all the time, regardless of the situation. That's compulsive. Rational choices is you're thinking constantly. You're constantly evaluating the context, the terrain, the business landscapes, your competitors, all the various parts of the software life cycle. You're constantly looking at them, trying to see what should we do, what's intelligent to do. And there's lots of collaboration, hopefully, between managers and developers to do these rational choices. I think rational choices are made when there's high collaboration and understanding between business and development. I'm kind of horrified. There's a checklist thing that some company has in the handouts. 19 steps for doing a planning meeting. And nowhere in there does it say that the business and developers should collaborate to do some, what I call bargain hunting, to look for the cheapest way to get the highest value. Doesn't say anything about that. It's just, here we go. Here's the user story. Developer, break it down to tasks, and go build it. No discussion whatsoever. That is compulsive behavior. That's dogma. This is the way our process works. Wizard of Oz. Wonderful movie, wonderful story. How much do you think the extras got paid versus Dorothy? Dorothy's our star. She's the star of the movie. We have some supporting actors, and we've got some extras, or some very, very insignificant players who are helping put on the show. We treat them differently. We treat them all differently. We don't do the same thing for our features, though, for our software. And that's what I'm saying partly with sufficient design. In sufficient design, I told you earlier, in our own software, we know who Dorothy is. We know where the most important part of our code is. We're going to craft the hell out of it. The supporting characters, or these guys here, the ones that just play these very, very minor roles, I can point you to parts of our code where there's a user manager that has a method for creating a user. And I think it takes about 11 parameters. It's one method. Anyone who studied code smells would say, oh, that's the long parameter list smell. I would say, yeah, that's the one parameter list stuff. It's been in our code for 3.5 years or more. We have no intention of cleaning it up. The code works. It doesn't bother us. We're not cleaning it up. You can tell us we're bad craftsmen because we're not cleaning it up, but we don't care. Why? Because that part of the code is over here. It's not Dorothy. It's not even one of the, whatever you call them, the supporting actors. It's just a minor part of the software. Maybe that's obvious to you, but what I'm trying to do is counter these two extremes of making everything into Dorothy or treating everything like it's, a minor role. You've got to make some distinctions if you're doing, I think, smart investing in your software. Sufficient design may be excellent to poor based upon the context at hand. A sufficient design could be absolutely excellent because you need excellence there. If you don't have excellence in that area, it's not sufficient. It's insufficient because that is the most important part of your software. And in other areas, you don't need an excellent design. You need something that's okay. Don't waste time on it. So anyone that thinks that sufficient design means poor design or mediocre design doesn't know what they're talking about. There was a fellow, there's been some articles written on this, I've written some blogs, people have written some things on InfoQ. One guy said that I absolutely fundamentally don't understand Agile software development. I have completely perverted the ideas of craftsmanship, and basically I should be shot. He was so angry at me for what I've been talking about with sufficient design. I don't know what is under his skin, but I've got him with sufficient design. Very unhappy with me. Because somehow or another I'm sending people off in a dark direction. Do you think that's what I'm doing? I think this is common sense. Some people have said to me, "You've told me nothing. This is just common sense." Right? I think so. But part of me saying this is because I'm hearing stuff out there from industry thought leaders that don't sound like this at all.
But you're creating sort of ambivalence and insecurity. It's like saying sufficiently shot depending on the context. It creates insecurity.
It demands thought.
Yes, that's a better.
What I'm really saying is we demand that you think. We demand that you collaborate. You can't have this wall between customers, between developers and managers. You simply can't have it. There's no good reason to shield developers from ROI discussions. ROI should be something developers are talking about all the time. Technical debt should be something that managers are talking about all the time. There should be a complete, sharing of the terminology we used, rather than these walls that we put up. Because if you have that, then you can navigate those waters much more intelligently. So I want more collaboration, and I want more sharing of domains to be more successful. Good enough has nothing to do with mediocrity. Was another thing that James Bach said in his Good Enough Quality article. Nothing to do with mediocrity. It's not about mediocrity. It's actually about excellence. If it's a 11 parameter method in a user management capability, that's excellent design. Right then and there, that's just excellent given my context. I don't need to worry. It's the simplest little thing I could do. I'm passing in 11 arguments because there's 11 pieces of data in a user profile, pass them in through parameters, shove it into the database, I'm done. It's excellent for that situation. It would not be excellent if we were encountering all kinds of bugs and all kinds of difficulty. People who are constantly getting calling that method all the time and constantly passing in the wrong arguments and causing problems in the database. That would indicate that it's a crappy design. But we haven't touched that code in years. It's been functioning perfectly fine. It's like a part of your house where things work just fine and you don't need to do anything more. I'll tell you a quick plumbing story, because this is another sufficient design case. We have one bathtub in our house. Little kids, they got to take baths. Or big people like me take baths too, right? And all of a sudden the water started just trickling out. little trickle of water. It takes an hour to fill up the bathtub. So my wife called a plumber. This guy comes out, looks at our house, checks water pressure all over the house, studies things, says, I've been in this field for more than 2 decades. And let me tell you something. You need new pipes. You need new pipes throughout your entire house. You need them all the way down to the street. It's going to cost you about $9,000. But trust me, you'll need it. You need it. And if anyone you get any second opinions, they don't have the experience I do. They'll tell you other things, cheaper things. Trust me, you need this. My wife tells me that. I said, let's get a second opinion. We get a second opinion. The second opinion is better. It says, no, your water pressure is okay in other parts of the house. It's just that one pipe leading to that one bathtub. Here's what we do. We're going to replace that one pipe. We need to knock out the back wall and then break your porch back there, okay, to do it. So the porch is going to get broken up. We don't put porches back, so you're going to have to pay for that extra. That's your thing. But we'll do the rest. We'll get a new pipe in there. It'll cost you $3,000. It's better than $9,000. But I'm pretty tenacious, so I'm like, let's get another quote. Turns out we get someone who comes and says, studies our house and says, you know, we specialize in old houses, and we have a technique. We blast CO2 up these old pipes, usually cleans them out. Costs you $125. What do you think we did? We wrote the check right then and there. The guy did the work, restored all of the flow of the water, and it's been working ever since then. It's only just now, so this was years ago, right? So only now, probably about, I'd say 8 years later, is it starting to slow down again. We call them back and spend another $125. That's, to me, what we see out there. There's a huge difference in the tool set of people building software, right? Some of them are doing the $9,000 solution without thinking. Others have much, much better tools and better ways of approaching problems. All I'm saying with sufficient design is, you need to be, if you're a Ruby on Rails guru, great. Learn WordPress. Learn Drupal. I want you to go to a craftsmanship conference and learn a CMS so that you know how to use a CMS rapidly in a situation where a CMS is a much better choice than Ruby on Rails. And I'll say it again. I'm saying to the managers, the non-technical people, get your head into software development. Understand it more so that you're not doing stupid things, like just being feature junkies and creating these 5.x messes. It's a real problem. Stop doing it. Our goal is to achieve an acceptable level of risk. Another James Bach quote. An acceptable level of risk. We can put out something quick and dirty if we feel like the risk is low. Once the risks start piling up, we got problems, and it's not an acceptable level of risk. It's an unacceptable level of risk. So risk management is an important part of sufficient design. The pragmatic programmers have been famously saying, learn one new programming language every year. I'd like to amend that, change that slightly if you're a programmer. Learn one new programming language every other year. In between, I'd like you to get magazines like Fast Company or Inc. magazine and read articles in there about companies. Learn about business. Or get deeper into the domain of your company. When I worked at a bank, I had to learn about swaps and caps and floors and all these financial instruments in order to be a decent programmer of products for financial instruments. Right? I had to get into that stuff. So staying completely focused on programming languages and programming stuff and never understanding business things, I think will hurt your programming career ultimately. So these are the business and the developer situations. We do not want a wall between them. We want them to collaborate together. So that's what I was here to say. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions if there's time.
Yeah, we have about 20 minutes.
Okay. Questions, comments?
So, you mentioned that mature teams have an understanding, a vision of how to change their design, their complexity, and so on, depending on their situation. What about less experienced teams? Because you're giving them a lot of leeway here to kind of, and you can imagine this situation where less experienced teams may make an argument that simply you need more complexity here, or whatever it might be. How do you work with inexperienced teams?
I think inexperienced teams are going to produce problematic solutions typically, right? I mean, the fact is, it's just wrong to create an inexperienced team, especially if you're in business to make money. If you're in business to make money, it's just foolish. So from the get-go, it's foolish to just have a totally inexperienced team. We need to have more senior developers, senior designers, working directly with inexperienced people to bring them up and to get rewarded for doing so, to create, that's what the pair programming is all about, promiscuous pairing and all that stuff. But usually there's not enough of these experts to go around because there's not enough appreciation of them in the organizations. I was talking to Mike Feathers the other day, or I guess last night, about this, that a lot of companies don't even realize that they're in the software development business. So if you don't realize in the software development business, you don't value high quality software people. You don't value them. You just think, oh, they're like, they're like plumbers. Just get a bunch of them together in a room and build some software. You're going to have problems. There's a pen back there, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think a lot of the poor decisions come from fear on both sides that they're not going to get what they want. The business people are afraid they're not going to get the product out the door soon enough, and the programmers are afraid they're not going to get to do the languages they want or the design that they want.
Yeah, that's a great point. Fear is all over the place. The business people fearing they're not going to get it. Like they know they got to get this stuff out there, but they're afraid they're not going to get their features done, so that's going to hurt them. They're not going to get the bonus. They're not going to get the recognition. They may not get the sales that they want. And again, the developers are afraid of either not getting to build their careers through writing better code or getting to use new tools, or even the fear of, by going too fast and producing such crap, the fear of having to maintain all that. I've met programmers like that too. They don't want a beeper going off in the middle of the night because of the crappy code that was produced. One developer I met at a party, he hated Scrum because he felt that in the Scrum environment he was in, which was at a very well-known company, they were feature junkies, as I call them. Feature, forget about technical debt. And he was getting calls all the time in the middle of the night. The beeper would go off because they weren't doing the kind of quality they needed to be doing. So he hated the situation. He was afraid of that. Yeah.
Do you have any advice on how to bootstrap this process where you only have a very, very limited number of experts to spread that?
Yeah, I mean, there's study groups, training sessions, there's e-learning, there's all kinds of ways to make people become much more expert at software development. I mean, there just has to be, a desire for it on the part of the management to pay for it and fund it. Also, it can't be a culture where people are flipping in and out of the company. It has to be a place where people want to work, for a long period of time, so that the fear of management is, I'm going to send you to training classes, I'm going to give you time to do your study groups, I'm going to blah, 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 buy your books and all that, and then you're going to go get a better job. Right? So that is a legitimate fear from a manager, right? Totally legitimate. So there needs to be some pre-work around that before you're ever going to build up those experts. And then, of course, once you do build the experts, you better well see that they circulate around and help bring up new experts. That has to happen.
That's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You can say more?
If you treat programmers as interchangeable parts, as commodities that you don't reward properly,
Yeah.
if you give them training, they will leave.
Right.
So you need to think about it as an investment,
Yes.
that you want to keep these people around, which means you need to treat them right and pay them properly and, you know, have a career path for them, which includes becoming a senior developer who's even more
Right.
coveted and rewarded and so on.
Yes, exactly, Gerard. Yeah, I mean, we were talking last night about the need for there to be a chief software designer. You've got, chief information officers and chief operating officers and all kinds of chiefs, and software development role is not regarded as a chief role, when in fact, there's a lot of problems that have come around from bad software design and bad technical debt management. So, yeah, Robert.
How do you have a chief software designer in an organization? This guy will be hands-off. You've got dozens of projects. There seems to be a natural ceiling almost built into it, where you turn into sort of a theory kind of guy. And you get basically, eventually, it's almost like you get promoted out of being as hands-on, where you can be opportunist and making things go right.
I think a good chief is, the best chiefs, they walk around on the factory floors, their hands are still in it. They're not in the ivory tower.
They have to want to stay in it, and then they will.
Yes.
If the whole objective is to get out of having to be involved in writing software and become an architect, that's your path out of doing software development, because doing software development is such a crappy job.
Right. Yeah.
Because the technical debt is so high, and you get pager calls all the time. And of course you want to get the hell out of there.
I mean, I was just in Peru. They told me in Peru, you're nothing if you're a programmer. And everyone knows it. And you will not go anywhere in your career if you stay a programmer. And that, I'm not just singling out Peru, but this is a discussion we had there, right? In certain countries, certain companies, that is the fact. They just don't reward that kind of knowledge. And it's a problem, I think, ultimately, because then you end up with, we never have more of these senior people in the organization. So, yeah.
I really like your idea about this designing sketch draft for a client.
Yes.
And I saw myself, both from management and from developers, objections of doing either of them. Yeah. So my question is, at what point you decide what to do for a particular feature, how you make this shared knowledge and people buying in before you even start?
I do it by being very intimately involved with the product we produce and with the programming. So that's how I do it internally in our company, right? I look at the code, but I also look at the customers and our balance sheet and all those things. I'm very much involved in all areas. So, I think really to do it right, you've got to be heavily invested in both areas, of both technical and the managerial stuff. You've got to be on top of it. If there's a deal coming in, or let's say one of our best customers says, we need you to fix this thing right here. We might drop everything just to fix it for them, because there's potentially a new deal happening in January, and if we show some goodwill now, it's going to go better for us in January versus ignoring them. So we'll say, we'll stop everything and say, you know what, I just got this call. I'm sorry, but can we put this on hold? Our programmers say, no problem. They don't say, oh, hold on a second. We're limiting our work in progress. We're not supposed to start something new. We're kind of careful with that, but we have a fair amount of work in progress. More than someone might look at us and say, you're not doing such a good job there because you have too much work in progress. Well, we're balancing a lot of different constraints to the best of our ability. And having stuff in progress is not hurting us. Okay, what hurts us is not having sales. So when it comes to a possible large sale, that is pretty high priority. Okay, but we don't let a sales-driven kind of culture dominate us so much that we don't work on technical debt, that we don't write good code, we don't write good tests. In fact, we do test-driven development pretty much religiously. We always do. But there's a refactoring piece of TDD. We don't always dial that up to 10. So sometimes we have to come back and spend 2 or 3 weeks refactoring something, which I'm perfectly happy to invest in, especially if it's an important area of the code. Yeah, Gerard.
Yeah, comment on that. I think you sort of touched on it earlier when you said you need to, be decision conscious. It's almost like with every requirement, you also need to talk about the quality level that you need to engineer
Yes.
into software.
Yes.
And some requirements, you just need fairly sufficient, it just barely works quality. It doesn't even need to be robust, just get a
Yes.
happy path working. The other areas need to be bomb-proof and highly changeable in the future, and there's all sorts of levels in between.
Absolutely. How wonderful would it be for a manager, coming with a user story to say, let's talk about the quality level of this feature. Because, and especially if you kept track of it, you say, manager, you've come to me the last 100 stories and told me low quality. Well, what's going on here? Because if you keep going low quality for every one of them, we got a problem. So, I couldn't agree more. I think there needs to be it needs to be visible what the quality level is from story to story as you move on.
Instead of using low quality, if I like your terminology, you basically, when you're looking at the feature, you're saying, we're going to craft it and put it on a wall, like different colors, and keep it for historical reasons that you know that this is what you did with open eyes. Then when time comes to refactor it, why and what to do.
Right. We're sketching it right now, we're crafting it right now, or we're refining it right now. These are the roles. This is what artists do. Right? Even artists that put out famous paintings, they actually come back and they refine it like years later. They actually do that sometimes.
In that case, this stigma of low quality, which developers, all of us saying, no, I'm not doing this.
Right, and it shouldn't, because you can always step back from something and look at it in a new way and say, we could have done it this way or that way, let's refine it a little bit more, because it's justified to refine it. I'm not going to refine my user management stuff until I have to. It's just going to sit there in its kind of smelly state because it works. Eugene, did you have a question?
Yeah, I actually want to suggest something. Josh mentioned a few times about e-learning courses that Industrial Logic produce. Let me run a quick test. Who saw these courses? Who used them? Please show hands.
So we use.
Okay. Let me suggest something. And there are few junta members here who will hear me saying this. Agile Vancouver would be ready to dedicate $1,000 to reimburse those who go to these courses and are not satisfied. So let me say again, if you go to these courses, buy them, and then send a mail to us saying, I didn't get any value and this is why, you get your money back until this $1,000 lasts. Why I'm saying this? Because of two reasons. One is, it's now mandate of Agile Vancouver to improve the quality of software, and I strongly believe that these courses do it. And second reason, I showed these courses to a few people. Not even once I heard back, oh Eugene, you committed me to this $250, I'd better go to Gotham. Well, I don't know if $250 would be good for Gotham, even for one evening, but quite a few times I heard this thing changed the way I'm doing things. I can tell you that Josh, it was 6 years ago, 5 years ago, came to our company twice. First time for a couple of hours, second time for I think an hour and a half, something like this. And he changed the way we were doing things, and we saw great value from this. So this gives you a chance to try.
Thanks, Eugene. I didn't pay him to say that.
I hope you will.
Yeah.
So at the start of the talk, you said this is your last Agile conference, and you're moving on to other things. So can you say anything more about what those other things are?
I'm becoming a big fan of Gary Vaynerchuk. And anyone here know Gary Vaynerchuk? Gary V. If you ever check out Wine Library TV, he's a big social media guy now and runs something called VaynerMedia.com. Basically, I'm not finding I get a whole lot of inspiration from the Agile world anymore. I've been going to open space since 1996 or 7, and I'm supposed to enjoy that kind of thing, but I find it I've been doing it for so long, I just find the Agile stuff's kind of a little boring, to tell you the truth. So I'm much more interested in not being bored, you know, because Gary said he got 1% bored one day in his job, 1% bored, and that was the day he changed everything. He said, I'm not going to do my normal role. He changed things. He started creating this thing called Wine Library TV, where he started filming a video blog, and his company profits started going down, and he did it anyway, and it became a huge success. But you know, his tolerance for boredom was very low. You know, I have a little bit more tolerance there, but it's gotten to a point where I need to spend my time in places where I'm inspired. I'm inspired by the lean software people. I just attended one of my first meetings there in San Francisco, talking about a case study for Dropbox. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating to hear that. And I asked him about some software technical debt issues afterwards, the guy that gave the speech. That's a group of people that I couldn't believe that the quality of the questions after that guy spoke. I mean, they were just so different than what I hear at an Agile conference. Very pinpoint questions about the kinds of validated learning he was doing and the kinds of experiments that they've done and things like that. So my interests are much more around, you know, what I want to understand is the magic of things like Quicken. Quicken, for example, and this is something Kathy Sierra said, it's inspired by her too. Kathy Sierra said, our focus needs to be on creating awesome users, right? If a user happens to use your software and it's awesome because of it, right? Awesome at balancing your checkbook. Awesome at you know, Keynote here. I can get things and make sure that they're the right, because as I'm dragging things around in the Keynote software, it's magically showing me the distances between things to help me make them, you know, identically separated. It's beautiful, and it makes me a better creator of pretty-looking slides because of it. What is the software? What are we doing to make awesome users, right? That's what interests me the most, and that coupled in with, you know, stuff that I'm not very good at, which is sales and marketing. You know, how do you weave all that in really successfully into the startup philosophy? I mean, I think the startup stuff that Eric Rees has been doing is excellent. We're doing continuous delivery now. We were inspired by Timothy Fitz and the continuous delivery, you know, video that he made. So we're doing it now. We're doing continuous delivery. I can literally check in right now, and it goes live. We're learning from that. You know, it's uncomfortable. You know, we're like, oh, gotta be careful here. Now we're checking in something. And we have a trunk. We don't have feature branches, just one trunk. We check in all the time. But we're forcing ourselves forward, pushing ourselves forward all the time to keep learning, right? So am I learning from Agile conferences? You know, I find that a lot of the times I'm not, and I'm just not that motivated to go. It doesn't mean there aren't great sessions happening at them. It's just that I'm maybe, you know, a little too bored with that stuff. I don't know, but so so where am I going? That's what I think I'm going towards, but I don't really know what it is yet. So.
Okay, I would like to thank Josh. Poor Josh lives in California. They have a few wineries there, but nothing close to this wine.
Oh, boy.
You can tell
Wow. Thank you so